nobody felt it as much as I did, because I was looking forward to running on the same line with Bernie Sanders. But that's not going to happen now. But I'm not going to quit. We're halfway across the river. We're swimming across the river now. We're halfway. There's no turning back. We got to swim to the other side. So the struggle continues. And let's all, try to come out of this funk, try to break through this depression and do what we have to do. We have 80 days between now and the primary on July 7th. I think that we can turn a bad situation into a favorable situation if we unite together and work together to make it so.
All right, Gabby, have we gotten any more questions in?
We do not, but we did get a response from, it seems to be our biggest fan, Tom Oman, who keeps replying to his questions. He just wanted to say, thanks, just looked it up, and it looks like I have to print out a form and send it to my clerk. Hopefully New Jersey sends everyone a paper form or makes an online portal to register so people without access to printers during quarantine can still vote by mail. He also said, thank you. I imagine the end goal is to have a Not Me Us member running and winning in every county. Bernie's message has resonated in me, and getting involved in local politics seems like a great way to ensure his message is spread, which is very nice.
So we did get a question in on Facebook. The first question we've gotten two, but the first question I think is on, everyone's mind. Do you support the legalization of marijuana?
Absolutely. My organization, the People's Organization for Progress, we have been on record for some years now supporting the legalization of marijuana. It was not a decision that we've reached quickly. It's something we started discussing probably more than a decade ago, and we have gradually moved through decriminalization to legalization. And so about, I guess, 2 years ago or so, maybe a little more than 2 years ago, we came out in favor of legalization. Marijuana should be legalized. It's legalized in most of the advanced industrial countries. We need to legalize it. We need to regulate it. We need to tax it. After we legalize marijuana, we need clemency for all of those nonviolent offenders who were incarcerated because they had a joint or a couple of ounces of marijuana and had their lives destroyed by this racist war on drugs. We need to end this war on drugs. We need clemency for all of those nonviolent offenders that have marijuana convictions. We need them to be exonerated, and we need their records expunged. And then we need, through the taxation of marijuana, in fact, to return resources to those communities that have been negatively impacted by this racist war on drugs, which has increased the Black population in our prisons tenfold. Just consider this: in 1966, there were roughly 100,000 Black men in federal prisons. And that was roughly 13% of the prison population, which was commensurate with our numbers in the general population. After the Rockefeller drug laws were passed in the late 1970s in New York State and then replicated across the country, state by state, literally within 10 years, the Black federal prison population was increased from 100,000 to 1.2 million. And it's even worse in the state prisons. In fact, New Jersey has one of the greatest racial disparities of incarceration in its state prisons. Right now, 70% of those held in state prisons are Black and brown people. So this has been the consequence, at least in part, the consequence of this war on drugs, which has destroyed people's lives. We need to see the drug problem as a health issue. It's not just a criminal justice issue, it's a health issue. And we need proper rehabilitation for people and resources so that people can recover from drug addiction. But yes, Lawrence Hamm is on record supporting legalization of marijuana, removing it from the Controlled Substances Act. And I will work with other legislators in the US Senate to help make this happen.
That's awesome. We got some more questions. So from W2GE just now said, will you vote for Joe Biden? Who would you like to see as a VP choice? What do you tell other progressives that may sit on the sidelines or write in who are let down that Bernie is no longer the candidate?
Very good question. Let me speak for myself. What I'm doing between today, which is the 20th of April, and July the 7th, for the New Jersey Democratic primary, I am telling everyone to vote for Bernie Sanders. The vote against Trump does not take place until November in the general election. I think there's a lot of confusion among some people. They think that somehow the vote on July the 7th is somehow tied to the election of Trump. No, Trump will face the Democratic nominee in the general election in November of 2020. This election on Tuesday, July 7th, is the New Jersey Democratic primary, where candidates within the party contend against each other. So on the ballot on July 7th will be Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. I am telling people up till July the 7th to vote for Bernie Sanders, so Bernie Sanders can get delegates and have influence and influence the Democratic Party in a progressive direction at the Democratic National Convention in August. After July 7th, and from that point forward, I have been saying for more than a year now, even before, you can go and look at certain television shows, online shows like Open Line, the radio show, or Open Line Online, the internet show. For a year, I have been saying that I will support whoever the Democratic Party nominee is out of the National Convention in August. If it is Joe Biden, I'm going to support Joe Biden. Now, am I happy about that? No, I'm not happy about that. Would I have preferred someone else? Absolutely. Bernie Sanders is who I would have preferred. But the disposition of political forces at this time does not make that possible. Bernie may have stayed in the race had he not run into that storm during Super Tuesday in South Carolina and the other southern states. So the political winds were not with us this time. So we have to push for Bernie to get the delegates, to push for our platform at the Democratic National Convention. And then once Joe Biden is the nominee, then we work to have Biden defeat Trump. Trump is the worst president of our lifetime. He is the titular head of a proto-fascist movement in the United States. And this is not rhetoric and an exaggeration. This is a man that's said to semi-automatic rifle-wielding militias that marched in state capitals just this week to liberate those states, which some of them took, of course, as a signal to engage in violent activity. And these are violent people. I mean, I think we're roughly a few years past the death of Heather Heyer, who was killed by white supremacists. And the irony of it is not ironic, but, it kind of dovetails into this discussion. Just 3 weeks ago, the Office of Homeland Security for the state of New Jersey, and you can look this up, don't take my word for it, go on the internet, look it up. Office of Homeland Security for the state of New Jersey declared that white racist supremacist organizations were the greatest danger to public safety in the state of New Jersey. This is not secret knowledge. This was in the newspaper. This was on all the news media, on social media. It's not a secret. It's just that people just passed over it. But these groups have been building in strength since the election of Trump. So the first step, one of many, many steps that will have to be taken, the first step is to defeat Trump. and get him out of office, because the longer he's in office, the more they use his presidency, and the more he uses his presidency to strengthen this dangerous right-wing movement. Look at how Trump stirs up racial and ethnic hatred, since the COVID crisis, because of remarks that Trump has made and has inspired other people to engage in violent acts. There have been many attacks on Asian Americans in this country. Even before that, there were attacks on Jewish Americans. People went into synagogues and killed people. Attacks on Muslim Americans. Attacks on immigrants. People went to the Walmart to just shoot Latino people, whether they knew they were immigrants or not, just went into the Walmart shooting people. We have a very dangerous trend in this country. And if you don't think fascism can come to the United States, you're in for a rude awakening. All you have to do is go on YouTube and reference fascism in the United States during the 1930s. The American Nazi Party used to have rallies at Madison Square Garden. And after their rallies at Madison Square Garden, they would march out of Madison Square Garden and march up and down Fifth Avenue in New York City. Right here in Newark, New Jersey, there was a pro-fascist organization that the FBI raided during World War II, and so on and so forth. And, what was it, this weekend? What was it? I think it was Saturday, the 18th, was the anniversary of Timothy McVeigh, when he and his crew bombed the federal building in Oklahoma. They took a truck and loaded it up with materials that composed the bomb. The bomb was so powerful, it blew away half of the multi-level federal building. You can go online and see the pictures. Over 100 people were killed in that bombing of the federal building by the white supremacist Timothy McVeigh, and most of them were children that were in the daycare center that was in the federal building. We have a very dangerous trend in this country. And Donald Trump says, when asked about these groups, he says, well, they're nice people on both sides. People that go into mosques and synagogues.
Oh, Larry froze.
Uh-oh.
Larry, we lost you. You might have froze.
Oh no. I'm going to reply to that question just so I can get the answer out. And then when Larry comes
Yes.
back.
Hello?
Poor Larry. Oh,
I'm
okay,
here.
Larry's back. All right, so
I'm
we're
here.
going to
I'm
reply
here.
to that question, and then we'll take the next question in 1 second.
Okay. No, someone had tried to call me. I didn't answer it, but it took a while for them to
That'll do
go
it.
away,
Okay, we have from the Lady Champion. If elected, what will be the first piece of legislation you would create and why?
The first piece of legislation that I will either introduce or sign on to as a co-sponsor will be legislation for Medicare for all. I think that is the project around which, at least this is what the polls show, that now the majority of Americans support Medicare for all. There are 32 so-called advanced industrial countries in the world today. The United States is the only one that does not have a national system of universal health care. We're backwards in relation to the other capitalist countries. And more than this, there are many poor third world countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, much poorer than the United States, and they have a national healthcare system. I think we can see now the folly of having privatized healthcare. With this crisis that we're in now, 22 million people have lost their jobs in the last 3 weeks. And what happens when you lose your job? You lose your health insurance. because we have employer-based health insurance in the United States. It shouldn't be like that. If you lose your job for whatever reason, you should still be able to keep your health insurance, because if you don't have health insurance, you won't be able to afford health care. Now, we have something in New Jersey called charity care. So when people who don't have health insurance, they go to the emergency room and they get they get medical services there, but they still get a bill. You think you don't get a bill just because it's called charity care? They get a bill for thousands of dollars. I'm speaking now from experience. I have friends that have gone through this. There should be no reason that a person would be scared to go to a doctor or a dentist because they don't have money. You know, what is the whole purpose of progress if it's not to make people's lives easier? What is the whole purpose of technology if in fact we enslave ourselves further? The purpose of progress in technology is to make human life better and easier so that we can pursue the things in life we enjoy and not have to work ourselves to death or be worried about not being able to go to the doctor if we have an illness, you know. So Medicare for all, that's the first thing I'll work on.
All right. Do we have any other questions that have come in?
Yeah, hold on. Okay, all right, we have another one. How can people become more active in getting these policy, I think that might have been a typo, from LFG 472, how can people become more active in getting these policies passed and awareness? I think it meant or getting these policies passed.
Right. Well, there are two ways. As individuals, people like, for instance, just to give you a recent example, this week, the so-called squad, the 4 women, the young ones in Congress, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Sister Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley. They all introduced a bill that said with this next stimulus that they're working on, that not a one-time payment of $1,200 a month, but $2,000 a month for every month for the duration of this crisis. People should receive that during the same period. Rent should be canceled, mortgages should be canceled, and other things. Now that's a bill we could support. Now, how do you support a bill? One, you can call your congressperson and let their staff know that you support this bill. And if that your congressperson is not, first, like you call up the office and you say, I want to know if Congressman Payne is a signatory to Ilhan Omar's bill to increase monthly payments to people during the COVID crisis. If they say no, then you as a constituent would demand, say, I want Congressman Payne to be a co-sponsor of this bill, you know, to either be a prime sponsor or co-sponsor, whatever. You can make a phone call. That's the easiest thing. You can send a letter. People think that they don't read these letters. They read the letters. In fact, they have a formula that every letter that they receive represents the opinion of X number of constituents in their district. So letters have an impact. Phone calls have an impact. So you do things individually, right? And then, of course, the most important thing is to vote. If the person doesn't move in the direction you want them to move in, you vote against them. But then the other thing is, beside individual action, is collective action. So you join an organization, and an organization that's concerned about economic justice. And so as an individual, you call and write letters, but as an organization, you contact the office and say, look, we want to have a meeting with you. People's Organization for Progress would like to have a meeting with you to discuss the merits of Ilhan Omar's bill to have $2,000 a month payments during the course of this COVID crisis. So we act individually and we can act collectively to influence legislation. And then The atomic bomb of activity is protest. We must protest. Don't ever listen to anybody tell you that protest is not important or protest doesn't work. Now, is every protest successful? No, but I'm telling you this, all social progress in the United States has been the result of protest. I'm telling you, there's not one piece of legislation that benefits the vast majority of people that people didn't protest for, going all the way back to the 8-hour workday, coming into the 20th century to end child labor, coming into the Depression, the creation of unemployment insurance, and the National Jobs Program, the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, you know, coming into the war on poverty in the 1960s, when Medicare and Medicaid was created, the Civil Rights Movement, the passage of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, the passage of women's rights to vote. Many women don't know the history of how much protest women engaged in to get the right to vote. And women didn't get the right to vote in the United States until the beginning of the 20th century. So for the 2 previous centuries, women could not vote in the United States.
And it's the 100th anniversary this year of the women's right to vote.
There you go. So that's the point I'm trying to make, that protest is important. Don't let people talk you out of protesting. Don't let them make you think that protesting it doesn't work, because in the long run, it does work.
And now, while Gabby types that up, we actually got a really great question in from Facebook. One of the viewers on Facebook, which before I ask you the question, remember, if you would like to donate, so Larry can win his Senate seat, his chance for his Senate seat, go to tinyurl.com/Hamm, so HAMM, supports 420. So the question that came in on Facebook was, what is your biggest difference to Cory Booker? So what would you say is your biggest, difference?
Well, there are many differences. First of all, our roots are different. I come out of the movement. I began my career as an activist when I was a senior in high school, when I was a president of my student government, when I led the first walkout at my school, led the first sit-in, and the first march and sit-in. I was 17 at the time. So I have been in the movement for social justice for exactly 49 years. I started in March of 1971. That's when my first walkout, march, and sit-in was. And I've been on this road ever since. I was active in the struggle for quality education. I was appointed because of the protests we had. That's what led to my appointment to the Board of Education. When my 3 years on the board was up, I returned to college because I had left college. I returned to Princeton University. While at Princeton University, I helped organize the anti-apartheid movement to get Princeton to divest its funds from companies doing business in South Africa. When I finished at Princeton University and came back home in the early 1980s, I organized in 1982 the People's Organization for Progress, and for 38 years, the People's Organization for Progress has been fighting for racial, social, economic justice, and peace. So the roots out of which he and I come, those are different. And I would say that one of the major differences is that Cory Booker is a liberal. Not that there's anything wrong with being a liberal. I would call him a neoliberal. And I am a radical. There's no other way to put it. I am fighting for reforms. Don't get me wrong. We need reforms. But I want to change the whole damn system.
So you're a true progressive.
Well, yes, a progressive, radical, whatever term you want to use. I think that's the major difference between us.
Gabby, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we have a lot. I was actually just trying to catch the end of what you were saying, because we got like 2 questions. I was like, what's your biggest distinction between you and Cory Booker? So I was like, let me get the gist of what you're saying and let me put that out there. Since it's already like, 7:45, I think let's try when we answer these, because a lot more came in, maybe about 15.
Oh,
So
my
let's try
goodness.
to get through them.
Mhm.
So
I'll give shorter answers.
There you go.
Mercury Driver says 2 questions. 1, how can we get rid of big money and corporate lobbying / influence in our government? It seems like almost nothing gets done in the government unless it's helpful to the 1% in large corporations. And then their second question is it pork roll or is it Taylor ham?
Is it what? Is it what?
Is it pork roll or is it Taylor ham?
I always called it Taylor ham.
Me
You're
too.
from New Jersey.
Yes, I used to love Taylor ham sandwiches, man. Oh boy, that was my favorite. Taylor ham and cheese on a hard roll. Oh, that was heaven. But anyway, yes, we got to get big money out of our political system. In the United States today, we live in a plutocracy. A plutocracy is a society ruled by the rich. More than a plutocracy, according to studies that were done at Yale and Princeton, we live in an oligopoly. Not only do we have rule by the rich, but we have rule by a very few of the rich people. You know, three families in the United States today control more wealth than half of the 330 million people that live in this country. And the vast wealth that they hold helps them to influence and control the political system. Changing this will be very difficult, but we must change it because we must have in this country, we can't call ourselves a true democracy unless we have one person, one vote. Right now, the amount of dollars that you have outweigh the amount of votes that we as individuals have. And this has a lot to do with decisions that have been made, not just by this most recent Supreme Court, but decisions going all the way back to the 1970s. So how do we change this? One, we have to get control of the entire Congress and the White House. Now, it's not going to be difficult. I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but we have to get Trump out of the White House. We have to get someone progressive in the White House, or at least in the immediate, we got to get the Democrat in the White House, and we have to wrest control of the Senate from the right-wing Republicans that are in there now, because they are blocking. Bills have been introduced to, in fact, overturn the impact, the effects of the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court, which says that people can really give unlimited amounts of money. You know, it says it's in essence that money is a part of free speech, but we know that that's not the case. So we have to get control of the House, control of the Senate. We have control of the House now, basically Democratic control of the House, and we have to get Democratic control of the White House. Now, let me say this parenthetically, because I know there are a lot of folks out there that understand how this system works. Just because we have Democrats in the White House and Democratic control of the Senate and Democratic control of the House, that does not mean that we're not going to have to struggle to push in a progressive direction to get money out, because unfortunately, you know, the people that run this country, they have influence in both parties. So no matter who gets elected, we're going to have to struggle, but we're going to have to get enough control and enough votes over our democratic institutions to introduce bills to limit and circumscribe the influence of wealth on our elections. It's going to be a long, tough fight, but we have to. We have no choice.
So, Gabby, next question.
You know, let me say this. I don't know if everybody can, well, I'm gathering everybody can hear me, right?
Yes.
I would really urge people to read a book called Democracy for the Few by Michael Parenti. The last name is spelled Parenti. Democracy for the Few by Michael Parenti. The book has been in print since I was a college student, but it's been republished and revised a number of times. So I would urge you to get the most recent version of that book, because it'll really give you some insight into how the few and not the many control our political system and what we have to do as citizens to change that. That book had a profound impact on my thinking when I was a freshman at Princeton University. Dr. Parenti is still alive. In fact, his son is now a professor and has also written some books, but that's a good book. And then the other book I would urge people to read for kind of historical view on what's happening is The People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. If you have not already, I imagine the people who are listening to this program are probably very progressive and radical already. But if you haven't read A People's History, you really need to do so. But in terms of how our political system functions and what we need to do to change it, Democracy for the Few by Michael Parenti, Parenti.
That's awesome. We should actually we should make like a Goodreads what's Larry's reading suggestion that we can.
You know,
link.
he actually did suggest Art of War that I read. I'd never read it. So Larry does give great suggestions.
We'll make a reading list. Okay, so we've got some questions. I'm trying to find like short, easy ones. Here's I had a good one. If elected, would you want to be a member of the squad? You share many of their values.
I would love to be a member of the squad. I would love to be a member of the squad because they're pushing. They are brave and courageous women and I'm not saying that just to blow smoke. You know what? You know, when Trump attacks AOC, when he attacks Ilhan Omar, when he attacks Tlaib, when he attacks Maxine Waters, his crazy followers go after them. They make death threats. They call their office. They follow their staff members. They leave packages of fake bombs and all kinds of stuff. They just convicted someone for threatening to kill Congresswoman Maxine Waters. So when I tell you that they are brave, this is not just rhetoric or in a manner of speaking. When they speak out for us, when they speak out against injustice, against racism and sexism and all the other injustices in our country, that makes the reactionary forces go into action and they go after them. They troll them online. They issue death threats. They send threatening letters. They send threatening emails. They stand outside. Listen, they stand outside of their district offices and take pictures of the license plates of their cars and the cars of their staff. So let me tell you, when you stand up for justice in this country, you get the heat and you put your life on the line. So I have the greatest admiration for the squad, for those 4 brave women Congress people.
Awesome.
All right, next question. All right, let's go. Are there any local places you would recommend donating some of the $1,200 stimulus money to help New Jersey?
Well, I don't have any pet projects. I would say go to the local food bank if you can help, because believe it or not, before this COVID crisis broke out, people were telling me that the food banks were nearly empty because people say, well, all these things are happening because of the COVID-19 virus crisis, but most of this stuff was happening before the COVID crisis. Before COVID, people were telling me that the food in the food pantries was the lowest they've ever seen, because people don't have money. They're